why couldn't the government, it has a legitimate interest to help poor people. Why couldn't the government accomplish that by just allocating some tax money to housing subsidies? And then you don't have to take somebody's private property.
That would be a policy decision, another way to try to get at that end to the taking, but I don't know that for sure. I would need to think about that and study that.
Well, aside from...
Hey everyone, welcome back to Capitol Insights. Today we're breaking down an absolutely explosive exchange between Senator John Kennedy and judicial nominee Mr. A-Frame that you need to see. Before we jump in, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest political analysis. Let me tell you folks, this hearing started with fireworks when Senator Kennedy grilled the nominee about rent control. The nominee's response? Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly confidence-inspiring. He could barely define rent control and seemed completely unprepared for basic questions about property rights and government takings. This is the kind of moment that makes these hearings must-watch TV, people. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Kennedy masterfully laid out the parallel between rent control and government taking private property for highways. The nominee kept trying to dodge with "I need to study precedents," but Kennedy wasn't having any of it. And hey, if you're finding this breakdown valuable, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We do this kind of analysis every week. The hearing then shifted to recent changes in religious accommodation laws. Finally, some concrete answers from the nominee. He actually demonstrated knowledge about the new substantial hardship standard for employers, but trust me, this was just the calm before the storm. Here's where Kennedy dropped the hammer, folks. He asked whether the nominee would have enforced Dred Scott and Plessy v. Ferguson as a lower court judge. The nominee's response was shocking. He admitted these were immoral decisions but still insisted he'd enforce them. The look on Kennedy's face was priceless. This hearing perfectly illustrates why we need strong senators asking tough questions during these confirmation processes. The nominee's responses raise serious questions about judicial philosophy and moral leadership.
What is rent control?
As I understand rent control, it's some cities may have laws that limit the ability of landlords to raise rent, but it's not something I'm that familiar with.
Okay. Well, why isn't that a taking that merits compensation from government?
I don't know whether that's been litigated or how that's been resolved. I have never dealt with rent control.
Well, I want to understand what you think about it, how you think. Why isn't it a taking? I mean, your government is taking money from the private owner of an apartment. Why isn't that a taking? Just like if they took his property to build a highway.
So I'm not well-versed enough in takings to give you a definitive answer, but I'll give you what I know about takings.
No, tell me what you think. Tell me how you would analyze that.
I would be looking at the precedents that say to what extent can government regulation be permitted.
Suppose there are no precedents. I know we'll stipulate you would look at precedents. But I want to know how you would analyze that case.
Well, the question is, what can the government do as far as regulation where there's still value in the property, but maybe not the maximum, and does that constitute a taking? That's what I'd have to study. I don't know the answer about that.
What do you think about it? How would you analyze it?
Well, from what I know about...
What are the competing interests?
Well, the competing interests are the government's interest in housing, I would think, on one side, the property owner's interest in making the maximum amount of money on the other.
Well, why couldn't the government, it has a legitimate interest to help poor people. Why couldn't the government accomplish that by just allocating some tax money to housing subsidies? And then you don't have to take somebody's private property.
That would be a policy decision, another way to try to get at that end. You're asking me whether it's a taking.
Yeah,
and I think that I am not sure that a limit on how much you can make constitute a taking, but I don't know that for sure. I would need to think about that and study that.
Well, aside from if you were back in private practice, how would you analyze that? How would you reach a decision?
Again,
please don't tell me you go look at precedent, because you're not going to find much.
I know that there are cases about regulation that limits the value of property. And I believe that those cases say, unless the property is basically brought down to no value, or very little value, it's not a taking. That's my memory.
No,
and that
that's
would be
not
relevant.
accurate. That's
but
not
I could
accurate.
be wrong about that.
You can have a highway come through and take part of your property, which
Right.
diminishes the value, but you've still got to compensate the landowner, and you've got to compensate the landowner for consequential damages as well. That's currently a taking. Why is rent control any different, Counselor?
Senator,
Achieve a government purpose in a less discriminatory way? Why isn't this open and shut?
well, Senator, without doing more work on it, I mean, I tried to tell you what I would think about it, but I'm also telling you I don't know necessarily how it would come out, and I would need to read and think about it more. But I would think about the government interest, understanding that there is a loss to the to the owner of the property, and figure out how those interact.
What do you think about his answers? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown, you know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe on Capital Insights, and ring that bell. We'll see you in the next video where we continue exposing the truth and asking the hard questions.